Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today, we're going to take a look at Mercury in the sign of Gemini making a square to Saturn in Pisces. This is especially interesting because this is happening right before Mercury is Cazimi at the heart of the sun, moving through its conjunction before starting to reset as the evening star. So, a really interesting transitional space for Mercury this week that we're going to take a look at today. I'm going to give you 5 things to watch for. If you guys watch my channel regularly, you know that one of my favorite things to do is to take an archetypal combination and turn it and turn it and turn it, catching the light off from the jewel of the archetypes and catching them at different angles. We learn different things and we can notice different patterns and expressions of the archetypes at work. So that's what we'll do today. Before we get into it, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share your comments and reflections if you've got them. I'd love to hear from you. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, nightlightastrology.com. When you go over there, a couple of things we're promoting right now. This month, on June 13th, coming up really shortly here, that's this week, we will have our 12th house webinar. This is on June 13th from 7 to 9 p.m. I'm giving a talk on the 12th house and the healing potential of the 12th house in your natal chart. We're going to be looking at the juxtapositions between the 12 rising signs and the 12th house by whole sign. That archetypal juxtaposition is critical for understanding the healing potential of the 12th house because it is very much rooted in the relationship with the first house. So anyway, I think you guys will enjoy that. If you can't attend live, you can get the download link for the recording afterward. We send you both when you register. On the courses page, look at the first year course. That is starting on June 16th. Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. Our first year course in Hellenistic Astrology begins soon this weekend. You can check out the need-based tuition option if you want a little help to make the program possible. And then check out the Horary program. Horary Astrology is a fantastic, really interesting branch of astrology. You can check that out. June 22nd, the Horary program begins. You need a little bit of a background in traditional astrology to take that class. If you stick around after today's content is over, I've tagged an informational video on to the end of today's talk so that you can learn more about Horary if it is interesting to you. So with those announcements out of the way, let's turn our attention to the real-time clock so we can take a look at this Mercury-Saturn square. All right, so first of all, here is Mercury at 19 degrees of Gemini, making the square to Saturn at 19 degrees. If we back this up a day, here's Tuesday, June 11th, where we are. Today, Mercury seems like it's 2 degrees away. Mercury moves really quickly. So if we track this out hour by hour, we're going to see that later today, Tuesday, June 11th, Mercury moves on to the 18th degree. And then before you know it, the 19th, by early morning, Wednesday, June 12th. And the square is made around 5:30 in the morning Central Time, Wednesday, June 12th. So it is applying. You have been feeling it probably yesterday and today. And then if we give this about 3 degrees of separation, we get it lasting through about Thursday of this week, at which point then very quickly, you will see that by Friday, June 14th, Mercury is on the same degree as the sun at the heart of the sun and transitions across the heart of the sun, the 14th into the 15th. I'm going to do a separate video on Mercury Cazimi, but I think it's worth mentioning in this video that the Mercury square to Saturn is happening just prior to the Cazimi moment, which means that the archetypal dynamics of Mercury and Saturn, which are very much present right now, are like the precursor or the step that comes just prior to the reset of Mercury. So that is critical because it means that what's happening is a part of a larger process of change for Mercury. Right before that change happens, its meeting with Saturn is therefore critical. All right, so 5 things to watch for. These are, in no particular order. But what do I think this Mercury Cazimi has the potential to be? With Mercury in its own sign, it is in its own chariot, which means it's protected from combustion. And so that does mean that this can be a Mercury in Gemini that is, while going through the combustion, it's been going through it, not as beat up, which is good. But it also means it can be more effective when it comes to that conjunction with the sun and the resetting and how productive and easy it may be to make certain changes or transitions right now with respect to all things Mercury. Typically, that means changes in thoughts, communication styles, learning, intelligence, rational, mental kinds of topics, technology, speech, the intellect. Those are all things that come to mind for Mercury. Philosophy, ideas. So there's a kind of mercurial change happening. It can be a little bit easier for that change to happen because Mercury is protected in its own chariot, meaning it's in its own sign while going through the combustion and then conjunction with the sun. And right before that happens, though, we have this square from Mercury to Saturn. So what might that mean, and how might it affect, or how might this square go into the changes that Mercury is about to make? So these are the 5 things that I would watch for. Number 1 is limited thinking. Could there be a change of mind, a change in the way you understand something, a topic that you study or learn? Like for me, it would be astrology. And could you go through some kind of mental or intellectual change because you come up against a limit? For example, I think one of the most predictable ways, I think one of the most predictable things that happens right before you're about to learn something amazing is you come up against the limits of what you know. You go, God, I just don't I'm stuck. I don't understand something. It's like that saying, you've probably all heard the saying before, if you knock, the door will be opened. It's like, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened. You can always tell you're about to get to a door opening in your understanding, and you're about to learn something and go past a limitation because you've reached the limitation and you become consciously aware of it. I mean, there's nothing worse in a sense than not, it's like, let me put it a different way. It's great to be like, oh, I'm losing my words. I now know what I don't know. You know what I mean? Knowing what you don't know. That's the phrase I was looking for. When you get to that place where you go, okay, I now know what I don't know, but previously I didn't know what I didn't know. Much better to be in the position where now you have a very clear understanding of what you don't know. That, to me right now, these could be the themes that are in the air this week. I am reaching the limits of my understanding of something, the limits of my knowledge or skill. And because I'm running up against that barrier, and then again, what's happening? Mercury Cazimi, Mercury at the heart of the sun, Mercury being reborn in a good sign, in its home sign. Your understanding can increase, your proficiency, your skill, your ability, your intellect, your understanding of things that you didn't understand or couldn't do can now get better, but they couldn't until you realized you couldn't do something or you had reached the limit of your understanding. God, I finally articulated that. This is a very Mercury square Saturn-like thing because it's also difficult to communicate with Mercury square Saturn sometimes. I was born with Mercury square Saturn. I feel like one of the things that's driven me my whole life has been a frustration with words and language and feeling like, you can't express yourself. And then so you become like a wordsmith, or you become really interested in speaking in language and articulating things because you're sort of driven by the constant feeling that you can't. And that's a very common thing for Mercury square Saturn people who might, like, I don't know if I'd consider myself a wordsmith or anything like, I don't mean to like aggrandize myself. It's just, I've always loved words and language and speaking and articulating precisely because I've often felt like I can't. So anyway, running into limits with what you know or understand or can do might be just the thing you need right now for the reset of Mercury to occur. And that's the check from Saturn. Number 2 would be emotional or mental rigidity. It's sort of similar. It's sort of like saying, how can you become more flexible, more understanding, unless you face the fact that emotionally you're rather rigid or cold or dry, or mentally you are too rigid and you don't have enough like sensitivity. There we go. So recognizing that you are emotionally rigid and too rational, or you are overly emotional and not rational, and you don't have enough space or objectivity or a healthy level of detachment. Either of those extremes between the emotional and the rational could appear right now as a part of a very healthy reset. We can grow, we can evolve, we can mature because I've realized I am too rational and I need to develop my emotional intelligence, or I am too emotional, I lack objectivity. There's nothing wrong with emotional or rational energy. It's an opportunity for them to be woven together in the very fabric of our being and our self-expression at a deeper, more meaningful level. And that can be part of the reset of Mercury as well. Number 3 would be similar, the capacity for emotional intelligence. How do I make a decision in a situation specifically because I'm weighing facts and feelings together? They take on equal importance somehow in the calculus of a situation or a circumstance. In order for something to be achieved or for you to move forward with a plan or a goal, there may be some need to weigh highly subjective factors with highly objective factors at the same time. And in order to do that, we have to tap into our emotional intelligence, or we have to develop more of it. All right, number 4 would be understanding via empathy. There are some truths in life that you cannot understand until you put yourself into the position of another person, until you reach out with your feelings and try to, even if it's just imagining, can I inhabit someone else's experience for a second and try to empathize? I think it might be insulting to say that you can ever really do that. Every experience is so unique, every person is so unique, every soul is unique. But when we're listening to people, when we're making decisions, when we're conceptualizing new strategies or approaches to things at work or in our day-to-day lives, and we're sort of weighing out the reality of other people and what they need or what they want, there's a social calculus involved, right? Can we sit back and go, I wonder how this would make this person feel? And if you know people, maybe you have to guess because you don't know people. So when you know people, it's not hard to imagine how something you're thinking about doing, or even if it's rationally, objectively, like the good thing to do, how is that going to make everybody else feel? So there are some things in life, I know this to be true for myself anyway, that there's no way to learn certain truths, there's information in life, like dharma, like dharmic level truth, spiritual truths of the universe that there is no way to learn unless you reach out from yourself into the lived experience of other people and imagine what it might feel like to experience what other people are experiencing. Saturn in Pisces asks us to go beyond the limits of ourselves in order to experience compassion for the other or the outsider. Saturn is a planet of outsiders, and in Pisces can help us tap into the collective emotional well of human experience, especially those that exist beyond our own set of identifiers. So there's some things that you can't learn unless you try to imagine how other people may feel. And once you do that, imagine with that new information in your heart, how that affects your thinking and how that affects choices and the rationality that we bring to every choice we make, informed by the heart, informed by empathy. That's a really great potential here. And number 5, I would say boundaries or barriers in speech and communication. Like, you may be with people in your life who just simply have a hard time telling you what they're thinking or telling you what they're feeling. And you may really run up against that, like, reality. Oh my God, the people in my life, my spouse or my best friend or the people I work with, can only communicate rationally. They cannot tell me what they're feeling. They cannot tap into the emotions of other people or the coworkers. My husband just won't tell me what he's feeling or thinking, or I lack the ability to rationally describe what I'm feeling. And so people think I'm an emotional mess, but really I'm just not as good at articulating myself in a more detached way. I'm very emotional when I speak. These are the kinds of things that, like, we drive ourselves mad and we drive each other mad, trying to change each other all the time. And really, I think what it boils down to is that we can only be ourselves, but in being ourselves, we also have to constantly reach out of ourselves to try to communicate in ways that other people receive, you know? So if you're the overly emotional spouse, try to calmly, state something like, so right now I'm feeling this and I'm feeling like I need this, you know, okay. That might be bringing in a little bit of the Mercury in an air sign to the sort of needy, weighty, or Saturn in Pisces. Suddenly, someone who only hears emotions now hears something calm and a little bit more um, anchored and rational, and all of a sudden they're willing to, maybe reach out of themselves and help you manage your emotions. On the other hand, maybe you're the kind of person who needs to work on identifying how do you feel. Yes, you're rationalizing about the situation, but how does it actually make you feel? Maybe the people around you really need to hear how it makes you feel. Because once they know how it makes you feel, then they can get on board with any of the rationalizing that you're doing about it. And they can hear that because they know where it's coming from. But are there any conflicts more perennial in our relationships than different communication styles, especially between emotional and more sort of romantic, passionate, emotional forms of communication versus sort of detached or rational or stoic or, so anyway, you can feel these dynamics at work. I can feel it in trying to make this video, honestly. And it may be that there are times where our boundaries or barriers need to get flooded. I set a boundary or barrier so I don't have to feel because it's scary. Well, time to get flooded. Time for the old rational head to get flooded by feelings and have to deal with it. On the other hand, it's like, I try to fortify myself with my emotions. Well, it's time to have a little bit more structure and groundedness and a little bit more detachment. So anyway, round and round we go. I hope that these 5 things have been interesting. Do you have something to add to the list? Because if you do, just put it in the comment section. I love it when you guys throw in your thoughts about these aspects. I try to present those that I think are sort of like the ones that you're going to see most commonly. They're like the biggest, broadest, and most consistent themes that show up with certain archetypal combinations. I do think it's fascinating that this particular Mercury-Saturn transit is much more consequential because of the immediate successive rebirth that Mercury is going through. It's as though there's a real opportunity here for a kind of mental and emotional leveling up. I'm going to be watching that this week for myself anyway. All right, well, if you stick around after I sign off, you can learn more about the Horary program. 12th House Talk is coming up this week. There's a ton of good stuff, so stay tuned, and I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. Bye. Hey, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. I'm going to tell you guys more about the upcoming Horary Astrology program, which begins later in June. And I hope that if you have never learned anything about Horary, that you will, at least in listening to this, be exposed to Horary astrology, have a little bit of an understanding of what it is. And if not now, then maybe sometime in the future, you can take time to study it. It is one of the forms of astrology that dates back to the earliest eras of astrology, the Hellenistic era, the medieval era, the early Indian period of astrology. And it is a branch of astrology that is concerned with specific predictive questions. So, for example, a horary question is usually formed in terms of a yes or no answer, and it is cast from the location of the astrologer at the time that the astrologer receives the question. So a typical horary question might be, will I get the job? Or will we get married? Or my cat went missing, will she come back? There are applications of horary astrology that involve the location of missing items, like where is my missing pen? Or where is, I actually helped a farmer one time locate a missing bull that had gotten out of the pasture. So it's a very, really fascinating form of astrology. It's very old, and it is like the birth chart of a question, a predictive question. So again, if I receive a question from someone and it's like, will I get the job? Then I cast that chart at the time I get the question. I usually use the receipt of the email time. And then I cast a chart for that question. And there are a series of traditional techniques that have been around for a very long time, thousands of years, that are used to determine the answer to that question. So with that in mind, let me show you a chart and you can learn, see what it's like in real time. So this chart is, the question that was asked is, will my spouse keep his job? This is a woman who had some very good reason to worry that her spouse might be getting laid off. And so she wanted to know so she could prepare herself, is he in fact going to be laid off from his job? And so when I receive that question, that's a horary question. When I receive it at 9:03 a.m. on April 10th of 2023, a little over a year ago, here in Minnetonka, Minnesota, where I live, I cast a chart that becomes the birth chart of that question. I then use a series of techniques, and that's what you're going to learn in the Horary program, are those techniques that go into answering all different kinds of questions. Questions about jobs, questions about money, questions about health, questions about marriage or relationships, questions about babies, questions about in pregnancy. I mean, you name it. And even missing pets and people and missing items. You see a lot of different approaches in Horary. And so over the course of a year, we study those approaches to different kinds of questions, and we practice and practice with different charts of different questions, learning the techniques so that we can have this predictive tool in our kit as an astrologer. So anyway, here's a question: will spouse keep his job? In Horary, what happens is you are always looking at the planets that represent the people and aspects of the question. The person asking the question is called the querent. The querent is always given the ruler of the ascendant and usually the moon as a co-signifier of the querent. So in this case, Gemini is rising. So we're going to give Mercury to the querent and the moon. Well, we can see the moon is sitting right on the cusp of the 7th house of marriage, which shows us that the querent, the person asking the question, is indeed really concerned about their spouse. The placement of the moon gives that away because it's sitting on the cusp of the 7th, which is going to be the house of the partner. So you see little things like that. They're a little wink that you have you have a radical chart, so to speak. Now, the 7th house ruler is going to be the spouse. That's Jupiter, since Sagittarius sits on the 7th house cusp. In Horary, we use quadrant-based houses because the theory was all developed through quadrant-based house systems, which is interesting. So this is the only place in my practice that I teach from and use a quadrant-based house system, not whole sign. Anyway, it's really fascinating to look at this chart because Jupiter is going to represent the spouse. So we can see Jupiter over here, about to be conjoined by the sun. Then we look at the spouse's job. And the spouse's job is going to be the 10th house from the spouse. The 10th house from the 7th is going to be the ruler of the 4th. That's called derived houses. This is something that appears in Horary quite a bit. So if we take the spouse as house 1 and we count 1 through 10 from house 7, we get to the cusp of house 4 for the 10th from the 7th, or the spouse's job. That is the sun. So here we see that the sun, exalted sun in Aries, is about to conjoin Jupiter. This means that Jupiter is combust. And when Jupiter is combust like that so badly and the sun is about to conjoin it, that is a moment of death for Jupiter. So the job, we know that combustion from a planet like that is often implied in the charts of death, or that's a condition of debility for Jupiter at the hands of the exalted sun. And Jupiter is, of course, sitting on the 12th house cusp, which is the derived 6th from the 7th house of the spouse, a place that was associated with misfortune. So we can see that this is a very clear indication that that Jupiter is being debilitated by, burnt up by the job, and that moment that's coming of the conjunction could be positively looked at as maybe a death and rebirth of your career, but the first thing that's happening is the death. When it is a possibility built into the question that he could be one of the people that's about to be laid off at his company, and you have this kind of symbolism, this is very clearly a yes, your husband is about to be laid off because of that combustion and the upcoming combustion and conjunction from the sun. Now you might say, what about Cazimi? Doesn't the Cazimi mean like a rebirth? Yeah, but not first, right? The first thing that happens is that Jupiter is being burnt up by the sun. When the sun is the job and Jupiter is the spouse, and there is a possibility that this kind of event happens, then yes, that is exactly what happens. We can also see, if we take out the outer planets, which is something we toggle back and forth in our horary class, We take out the outer planets, and we can also see that the very next thing that is going to happen is the moon, as an indicator of the flow of events, is about to trine the sun and then immediately hit Jupiter, which means that the moon is also translating the light from the sun to Jupiter. And when the sun is acting here as a malefic, burning Jupiter up, this is another sign that the flow of events is going to lead that malefic sun to eliminate Jupiter. The malefic sun only in this context because Jupiter's combust. So anyway, these are little rules of horary, and there's a ton of them, right? For every different kind of question, there are different ways of assigning planets to the parts of a question, and there are different techniques that we use to answer the question. In that case, the judgment of the chart was, it does look as though your husband is going to be laid off. And indeed, that was the outcome. Her husband was laid off within a week. So the way that I framed it in the answer was very uplifting, because I said, this is when we see this kind of event, a Jupiter Sun Cazimi, which we've had in the sky recently just now too, as I'm making this, that can be a sign of rebirth. So even if there's a death and a loss here of job, the opportunity for this to be a career reset is also implied by the transition of this Jupiter-Sun conjunction. And she did write to me later in the summer last year to tell me that he found a new job. So, and it was indeed a positive reset. So half of the art of horary is delivering the news. How do you deliver a predictive result without increasing someone's anxiety, in a way that's constructive? How do we take what we see and translate it for someone when the question is predictive? And there's often a lot of, people have a lot of emotion invested in the outcome. So this is a beautiful form of astrology. If you are interested in studying it, here is how to register. You go over to the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. And you are going to go to the courses page. And when you're on the courses page, you're going to click on the horary course. You need to have a background in understanding dignities, aspects, and house meanings. And then it starts on June 22nd. At the bottom, you will find that there is need-based tuition assistance. And there are also payment plans that you can utilize, and a one-time payment saves a little bit of money. So, but if you need tuition assistance because it would be impossible for you to take the program otherwise, please be sure to check that out and come study horary. It's an amazing, amazing form of astrology. If I could do nothing but practice horary, I would, because it is so interesting to see the unique picture of each situation come to life in the context of a horary reading. There's no birth chart needed for it either. It's amazing that astrology can work that way. We always think, it has to work off from a birth chart. No. We can use astrology just like we use tarot cards. Cast them out at the moment a unique question comes up. Cast a chart at the moment of a question, and you have a series of techniques and approaches that can help you answer it. So that's horary in a nutshell. I hope to see you guys there, and thanks for listening.